We're not going to read all of chapter 2. You can read it on your own. It's a list. It's a list that Ezra gives us of the names of the people, the main people that went, how many people in each of the clans went, how much stuff they took. It's a list. But that whole list tells us something. You're not alone. You're not alone. Paul says it like this: there is no temptation or testing or trial that has overtaken you, but such as is common to man. And God is faithful in that with the trial, He provides an escape hatch. Our problem is we're usually not looking for the escape hatch. We're looking for how to hang out there and not be too bad, or kind of get through or do it ourselves, whatever. We're not looking for the escape hatch. But the key is there's nothing new under the sun. The struggle that you've had, somebody's had it before. Probably somebody you know. And that's, again, why we are called to share with one another in one another's lives so that we can build one another up. Paul says it in 2 Corinthians. He says that we comfort others with the comfort wherewith we have been comforted by. Did you catch that? You've been comforted by some situation, by the Lord. He's comforted you. He's strengthened you. He's led you. And you go, wow, yeah, that's one of those altars in my life from the Lord. Yes. And then you encounter someone who is going through a very similar struggle. You could go, oh, I can tell you the answer because I did that too. No. That's no comfort. That's telling somebody they're too stupid to figure out what you knew. And you didn't know it. God gave it to you. But in that, you were comforted by God. You can reach out to that person. And with reality and with compassion, you can say, hey, I have been where you are. Maybe not exactly. But I can understand the kinds of things that you're going through. Not entirely, maybe. But I can understand some of the... And because of that, I want to stand with you. Maybe you don't even get to that place of being able to say, hey, I have a similar experience, but you can know what they're going through, and so your heart is broken when their heart is broken, and you can stand with them and go, I'll just be here. Do you know one of the best ministries to people who are in pain, especially in mourning, is just be there? You don't have to say anything. You don't have to tell them how their life can be better. Don't you dare tell them, well, this is all going to work out because you know what Romans 8:28 says. Don't you dare say that to someone who's in the midst of horrible, crushing defeat or sorrow, because it rings hollow. Unless, of course, Jesus tells you to, and then, He's more important than I am. But usually at that moment in time, it will just sound hollow to someone. But to be with them, to cry with them, to listen to what they are saying, man, that's powerful stuff. That is powerful stuff. Comforting others with the comfort that you have been comforted by. You're not alone. You're not alone. Take a look at chapter 3, verse 1. I love this. When the 7th month had come, and the children of Israel were in the cities, the people gathered together as one man in Jerusalem. Then Jeshua, the son of somebody or other, and his brethren, the priests, and Zerubbabel, the son of Shealtiel, and his brethren arose and built the altar of God of Israel to offer burnt offerings on it, as it is written in the law of Moses, the man of God. Though fear had come upon them because of the people of those countries, they set the altar on its bases, and they offered burnt offerings on it to the Lord, both the morning and evening burnt offerings, and they also kept the Feast of Tabernacles, as it is written, and offered the daily burnt offerings in the number required by the ordinance for each day. Now consider this. Josephus tells us that the altar they built was 20 cubits by 10 cubits. Cubit is 1.5 feet, so that's 30 feet by 15 feet. It's big. It's big. And it's all the way that you built an altar in those days, if you were an Israelite, was you didn't cut the stones. You used unhewn stones and laid them together. So they went out and found stones that they could lay together that big, and that was the altar. But here's what I want you to consider. When they came back to Judah, they didn't all, there were 50,000 of them, which is not a whole lot, and they didn't all go into Jerusalem and start building houses and build up the wall and build up a temple and then build an altar outside within the courtyard and within the big walled, protected area, because there were enemies all around. They were afraid of the people around. And we're going to find out later, they went to work rebuilding the walls with a sword in one hand and a trowel in the other. But the temple had been destroyed. Jerusalem had been leveled. There's next to nothing there. And what do? In this big empty space, they build the altar first. They built the altar first. If I were Zerubbabel, if I were Ezra and Nehemiah, I wouldn't have done that. I'd have said, okay, let's build the wall first to protect us from all the people around. And then we'll build the courtyard and the temple, and then we'll build the altar, and then it'll be safe inside there. It's not what they did. They built the altar first, right out there in front of everybody. The people that they feared. Why? To worship God first. Not when I get time. Not once I get this stuff together, then I'll have time to spend time with the Lord. But I got to get this, and this is good stuff, Lord. No, the first thing they did, it says in the 7th month that's the 7th month of the year. It was the 3rd month they were there. And they all went to their various towns, but then they all came to Jerusalem and built the altar and started the worship. In the rebuilding effort in your life, when you come to that place of rebuilding, build the altar first. Don't say, okay, I'll get all this stuff together with God's help and then I'll be able to spend time with the Lord and worship Him. Doesn't work that way. Build the altar first. And I find it interesting that it says that they celebrated the Feast of Tabernacles. The Feast of Tabernacles is the feast where they celebrated how God cared for them in the wilderness. And the way the Feast of Tabernacles works, and if you go to Israel today, during the Feast of Tabernacles, they still do this. They go out and they live in little tents. Everybody lives outside of their house. They put a little tent in the backyard or a little booth somewhere. And they build it out of palm leaves and branches and stuff, or they'll use tents, and they sleep outside during the Feast of Tabernacles so they can look up at night and see the stars, and they can remember how God cared for the children of Israel in the 40 years of wandering through the wilderness so that they were always cared for. And I think that's cool that they celebrated that. It's the one that's mentioned first as the first feast they celebrated, because here they are having come back from the wilderness to their destroyed land. They build an altar and worship Him. Okay, let's worship Him by remembering, hey, He took care of us before we even had a land, when we were just wandering without a land of our own. Here we are in our own land, and we can build an altar and we can worship Him. Build the altar first. You don't need to get all that other stuff in place first. If you put that in place first, you're going to find the altar doesn't fit in there. You made it too small. You put it in the wrong place. Let the altar be built first, and the continuing worship of God. Get that in place first. All the other stuff will follow, finally. In the last part of this chapter, it says in verse 8, in the 2nd month of the 2nd year of their coming to the house of God at Jerusalem, Zerubbabel, the son of Shealtiel, and Jeshua, the son of that guy, and the rest of their brethren, the priests and the Levites, and all those who had come out of the captivity to Jerusalem, began work and appointed the Levites from 20 years old and above to oversee the work of the house of the Lord. And then Jeshua with his sons and brothers, and Kadmiel with his sons, and the sons of Judah arose as one to oversee those working on the house of God. Sons of Henadad and their sons, and the brethren of the Levites. And when the builders laid the foundation of the temple of the Lord, the priests stood in their apparel with trumpets, and the Levites, the sons of Asaph, with cymbals to praise the Lord, according to the ordinance of David, the king of Israel. And they sang responsively, praising and giving thanks to the Lord, for He is good, for His mercy endures forever toward Israel. Then all the people shouted with a great shout, and they praised the Lord, because the foundation of the house of the Lord was laid. All right. Awesome. There's a 2nd year. Now they've got the foundation laid.